Are any Bucks predicted to win some individual awards this season? Camille and I look at the latest from ESPN and share our thoughts on some dark horse candidates coming up next.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis, and we are moving closer and closer to the start of the NBA season. Did you know how you know you're getting close here? Was this 2K release weekend?
Yeah, early release was Wednesday. So the traditional release is next
Wednesday,
week, I think, on
man.
the 4th. Yeah, next Friday is the standard release, quote unquote.
I'm starting to get washed when it comes to video games that I've even missed that one here. But that's one telltale sign that we're getting close. The 2K has come out as we started to see the player ratings trickle out. And now we're starting to see some individual columns starting to be formed here on which teams will surprise, which teams will disappoint, and individual awards. So ordinarily, I wouldn't pay much attention to this. There was, frankly, the reason why we're having this discussion is because of one of those awards in the inclusion of one player that caught my eye and made me think, okay, is there a chance we could see some accolades for some Bucks even without Giannis on this team? So I want to go through some of what ESPN put together and how they weighed in on these awards, your thoughts on some of those, and then shift it more towards Bucks players, because there is one member of the Bucks that is included in this, not picked to win the award, but he is picked among the top 5 candidates for it. And then our thoughts on where did they miss the boat and some other ones that we should take a look at. But let's just start with that. Camille, the player is Kel'el Ware. And the question was, which player will win? Who will win the most improved player award? Kel'el Ware finished 5th with 17 points or votes. And the leader was Stephon Castle, followed by Cason Wallace, then Dylan Harper, then Amen Thompson. But Kel'el Ware getting a decent amount of recognition for this list, not too far away from 3rd in the thoughts of these prognosticators to be the most improved player in the league this season.
I love that pick. I think that's an interesting one because I think what it says is that there is still so much belief in Kel'el Ware's talent. And the idea I would think behind him being top 5 in this particular voting panel is the fact that he's a guy who had talent. There have been documented, I felt issue might be too strong of a word, but we'll use the word issues here between himself and Spo down in Miami, with his playing time being a little bit inconsistent and just not getting enough runway to kind of learn through his mistakes in real time. So the idea of him coming to Milwaukee in a situation where he might be able to be a starter for this team and get a chance to really get that extended playing time where he's able to play through mistakes, different coach, different system, so to speak. And again, it's a belief in that talent that he does have, because he looks like he could be a walking double-double really, really easily. So if he can get to Milwaukee in a larger role, more consistent minutes, and continue to put up the numbers that he was showing that he could when he got more extended playing time, I can get the idea of his name kind of rising into the conversation of like, have you seen what Kel'el Ware has been doing in Milwaukee since he's been traded from Miami?
And true to form, there is a write-up or at least a little blurb on every single player, every one of those 5, but Kel'el Ware.
I found that interesting.
In the article, not even a mention of Ware's going to have a bigger runway here in Milwaukee. Like, none of that. We got a paragraph plus on Stephon Castle, Cason Wallace, and Dylan Harper, and then Amen Thompson with one of the NBA's most elite athletes. That's the write-up that we get on him. But nothing on Kel'el Ware. And look, I mean, Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, it feels like their ascension has already kind of come here. Like, I hate the most improved player award because of just how it seems like it varies across the board and what other people's criteria is for it. I'm not saying that just because you were drafted so highly doesn't mean you can't improve year over year. But I really have a hard time giving up that award to somebody that was drafted second or fifth or somewhere around there overall. Like, to me, the intention of the most improved player award is like found money that you turned into a rotational piece or a starter player or even an all-star. Like, those types of leaps is what most improved should stand for. And technically Kel'el Ware isn't in that like found money. That's what I would put on like AJ Green, Ryan Rollins, right? But Kel'el Ware wasn't like the number 10 overall pick, and it was very up and down his 2 years in Miami. That, to me, like, that's the prototype for this award of, okay, fresh start, like what we saw last year with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Fresh start. Look at what he did with more runway. And that's the other interesting part to me is I bring up Nickeil Alexander-Walker because there's like, to me, there's two potential Bucks to look at for most improved player. And their comps are on the same team from last year in Atlanta, where you look at Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a finalist, Jalen Johnson, and kind of the back and forth between when did it really start for them, this improvement. And to me, that kind of lines up with Kel'el Ware and Ryan Rollins this upcoming season as well.
Yeah, to your point about the most improved award and just how it's given out, we talked about it this last season where I felt like the Ryan Rollins case should have been a lot stronger than what it was, given that was found money for the Milwaukee Bucks, so to speak. Really did walk into such a bigger role, a little bit unexpected in a way because he was going to be walking into more playing time, but the Kevin Porter Jr. injury put that into overdrive for him, really walking into like that starting point guard position, and then injuries continued and he kept on finding ways to produce. So a lot of times to me, also, this award feels like it's a year late where it's like, okay, we kind of saw you do this and now we're really seeing you do this. So here you go. So this could be a situation, to your point, where the Bucks have a couple of guys who are in the running for most improved player of the year this upcoming year. But I am curious what like the team win totals will do for that, if that will have an impact on them. And if that is the case, do they still get any credit if they are improving their game along the way? Like a Keontae George in Utah, where like watching him last year was like, oh my goodness, like he is really starting to become a player. But Utah was so bad that you just did not hear too much about him outside of the fact of like he's been a bright spot, but like that was really it.
Yeah, and like it's funny that Stephon Castle, if we look at the counting numbers here and him being, and look, I get it because of the expectations for San Antonio, because he's playing next to Victor Wembanyama, because they played in the NBA Finals a season ago. There was much more of a spotlight on that team and Stephon Castle, so he is going to catch more shine than most of these guys. But Stephon Castle is 21 years old. Last season, he averaged 16.7 points, 5.3 rebounds, 7.4 assists, 3+ turnovers a game as well, and shot 47, 33, and 73 for his splits. Ryan Rollins averaged 17.3, 5.6 assists, 4.6 rebounds. So within a half a rebound of Stephon Castle per game, 2 fewer assists. Part of that was you still had Giannis on the team. You split some of those duties with Kevin Porter Jr. as well. Fewer turnovers. His shooting splits were 47, 40, and 79. So he was a more efficient scorer and basically within striking distance of all of those categories, outscored Stephon Castle. And not a peep of Ryan Rollins for potential most improved player, when, again, we talked about seeing Taylor Jenkins, what he has done with some young guards in the past, and tossing him the keys to effectively Ryan Rollins to say, go ahead and do the same. That's the one thing for me that I look at and say, you know, you can really talk me into Kel'el Ware because of the talent, but I am a little surprised we didn't see Ryan Rollins on this list. And you and I were talking about it too, of like, my initial thought was, well, he already kind of had his breakout a season ago with that scoring increase that he went through. But again, it's basically the same in terms of scoring volume and pretty close in the other counting areas, more efficient than Stephon Castle was. Stephon Castle made the list. Jalen Johnson, we made the comp. Like Jalen Johnson started to do the same things second half of the season last year, and it was jumping up to basically 23 points per game, which I think is within reach for Ryan Rollins that got him on that list. So like all those things combined, I am surprised. And granted, we don't really know who this was and how high level they went with these lists they put together. But I am surprised there wasn't Ryan Rollins on this list over Kel'el Ware.
Yeah, and that makes me think about criteria for the award because sometimes it's a year late. So I would like to talk a little bit more about like, could that be the case for Ryan Rollins? And ultimately, I am curious just your overall thoughts on how that award tends to be picked because this past year could have been kind of like the launching point for a Ryan Rollins most improved case. And then this upcoming season could be the thing that solidifies it.
All right, more on the case for Ryan Rollins, and then a few others. Or the Bucks were not included, but we feel like let's at least keep an eye on this. We'll get to that coming up next.
Support for today's episode comes from Indeed sponsored jobs. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed sponsored jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific needs like skills, certifications, and locations. So less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent actually finding the right fit. People are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. And usually the biggest difference of having someone come in isn't necessarily doing more work. It's really just having someone who knows exactly what needs to happen and then helps everything run smoother in the process. So spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Head to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs.
All right, before we move on to the other awards, you had some closing thoughts on Ryan Rollins.
Yeah, because I felt like for a long time, like the most improved player award, like you said, should be about found money. It should not be like this guy went from, averaging 15 to 20 points. And now he's a star. He's an all-star now. So he's going to get the bump. Like that was like the Ja Morant most improved player where it was like, he was already good, but now he moved to an all-star level. And I've seen the conversation being had. I think it was Tyrese Maxey actually who talked about this during last season when I forget who he was speaking with, but the conversation was around this award. And Tyrese Maxey's argument was like, I get what you're saying about feeling a type of way when it goes to the newly found all-star, so to speak. But he was saying the leap from going from being like a good player to an all-star player is actually a really, really hard leap to make. And that there should be some consideration for those players who come out of being a good player and starting to turn into a great player. Like that jump is very, very hard to do. But spirit of the award, he was like, I think a guy like Ryan Rollins is like the spirit of the award. So I do want to point that out because for some of the guys on the list we talked about that ESPN had like a Castle and Case and Wallace, like there is some credence to the idea of like the jump that you have to take to become like an all-star level player is a hard one to do because there are only so many all-star slots. So to get to that point is saying something, but I do think the spirit of the award is more in line with what you were talking about with it being like found money. Even like Giannis's most improved player award year, where it was like, you didn't really expect too much from this kid. And like, here he comes. And now he is somebody that you have to recognize and understand in the league. So I do think that those two different ways going about it, I feel like if you do look at it with the lens of it's harder to make that jump from being good to great or, from a player to an all-star, then I think that would help the Ryan Rollins case. But if you're looking for found money, feels a little bit too low for Kel'el Ware. But just given the role that he had in Miami, I think he kind of fits more into the category we were talking about of like someone who had decent numbers, but then he takes a jump. And it's like you kind of just have to acknowledge the jump that they took. So I think for the Bucks that they do have two different guys in Ware and Rollins, where it could be you have a case, but they're different types of cases for the same award.
It's basically like the individual equivalent of, everybody says too, one of the most difficult things is to go from the 40-win team to the 50
Yeah.
team. And we saw that too, with however long it took the Bucks to finally get there in 2018 and stay there until the last couple of years. And now we've seen the challenges of getting back there. There were no other Bucks that were picked in the top 5 for any of these categories. We'll go through where we think there could be potential, but I want to breeze through some of the other awards and some of the things that stood out the most to me. Who will win MVP? Victor Wembanyama got the most votes. I wouldn't disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Nikola Jokic second. I think that's over because of where Denver is headed, and it feels like we have moved out of the Jokic and Embiid and Giannis and James Harden and all those guys, KD era of one of these guys is going to be the MVP for the next handful of years. I think that era is over, and it is now into the Victor Wembanyama, Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Anthony Edwards type. Like, that's what we're looking at. So I think Nikola Jokic is way too high. And granted, it was a wide gap between he and Wemby. 102 points for Wemby, 31 for Jokic.
Yeah.
But I would not have him that high. I don't know that I'd take him out of my top 5. Giannis was 5th with 8 points. So a decent gap between he and 4th, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Luka Doncic was 3rd. I mean, Giannis, you at least have the storyline of reinvigorated, re-energized, new team and the expectations in Miami, but kind of see above of why I feel like best case scenario is a nice story. Giannis shows people, hey, you should have had me in this conversation all along. Miami has more success than I think either you or I think they're in line for. But I don't think we're looking at like a top 3 finish for Giannis this season.
Yeah, and I mean, Giannis has finished top 5 in MVP voting since like 2018, I believe it was, with last year being the first year that he wasn't even in the top 5 of that conversation. Again, injuries, games played, so on and so forth. But I think that's probably where Jokic also ends up, where it's like he's probably going to be a guy whose name is just constantly in the conversation because of who he is still, even at this point, with what Denver is going through. Like the ESPN article highlighted, like, especially being an elevated Denver club that lost talent in the offseason by trading Peyton Watson. And it's like, I mean, even if Peyton Watson was there, I think Jokic would be a guy whose name is in the top 5 of the MVP voting, just period, because of who he is. I think he's like an MVP. Just you're going to see his name in that conversation every year, similar to how Giannis has been since he kind of took that leap himself.
The rookie of the year. I don't really have any takeaways here. Cam Boozer actually got the most points, followed by Darren Peterson, AJ DeBonta, Caleb Wilson, and then Darius Acuff. I'll say this. Given nothing other than what we saw in Summer League, if it weren't for the roster log jam and just an uncertainty of, is it going to be brought along slowly, and it's the second half of the season that we see the keys kind of handed to Braden Burries and more comes from him, then I could at least be talked into moving him into the top 5. But because of that uncertainty, I think it's perfectly fair that he's not there. I don't know about Cam Boozer because I like for winning the rookie of the year. I think the splashier options are those middle 3. Like either the Jazz are a top 6 team in the West, which is going to be challenging even with an improved team, but either they're there and it's, oh, look at the impact of Darren Peterson. The Wizards are finally a playoff caliber team, and you would look at not just Trey and AD, but AJ DeBanza or Caleb Wilson and what he did throughout Summer League and just, the interest that's peaking in Chicago. and everybody seemingly thinking it's a foregone conclusion that the Bulls are clearly better than the Bucks. Like one of those three would be where I would land for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I think for Cam Boozer, it's the opportunity that he is going to have in Memphis. I think with Darren Peterson in Utah, he does have a lot of other guys around him on that team with Jaren Jackson Jr. You mentioned Keontae George. You got Lauri Markkanen. So there are other guys there who are going to have a big role. So I can see people like, I'm not sure if it's going to be him. AJ DeBonsta, similar to a degree with AD and Trey being there, but like he could end up being like the biggest splash. So I think I would actually probably go DeBonta over Peterson odds wise. I mean, it was very close within this particular voting straw panel. And then Caleb Wilson's also going to have opportunity in Chicago. Same with Darius Acuff in Sacramento, where it's like there aren't that many other guys on that roster. Well, Chicago, like you have Josh Giddey, you have Buzelis, but outside of that, really like young prospects, you can look at Norm Powell's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. So that could affect that, but it feels like he just has an opportunity to be a starter right away, to come and play meaningful minutes right away. And I think that does help, especially when there aren't other bodies who are helping with the scoring load as much as could be in Utah or in Washington. So ultimately, I think if I had to try to make a guess, Cam Boozer would probably be mine as well, just because of what else is around him in Memphis. And Memphis has like a sneakily interesting team. I'll say like the pieces and how they all fit together. I don't think they have enough to like compete in the West this year, but I do think that Memphis has enough that when you see them on your schedule again, you're just kind of like, it's going to be, we got to go and play Memphis tonight and it's going to be tough. So I get the thought process behind having Cam Boozer at 1. And I also love the fact that the top 3 picks there, which are Boozer, Peterson, and DeBonsta, the actual top 3 picks in the draft, are all pretty close to one another within like the total points that they got in this particular exercise, because I do think it's going to be a close race to a certain degree, although I think Boozer has the most opportunity out of those guys to really make an impact.
Okay, where else could we see the Bucks here? That again, no other categories. Was there a Bucks player selected? Where is there potential for a breakthrough? And then one thought that I had, high level, on a couple other awards that are combined here. We'll get into that coming up next. Support for today's episode comes from Square, the system powering so many of the places we already know and love. Whether you're running a packed game day spot, a local restaurant, or growing a business, Square gives sellers the tools to run their business without making things more complicated. Square brings payments, inventory, payroll, invoices, customer insights, and more together in one connected system. So whether you're a one-location business or growing into multiple locations, Square gives you the tools to sell, manage, and grow without needing an IT team to figure it all out. Think about those building up those smaller businesses, watching them along the way, everything that goes into it. It's no different than building teams. And as we just talked about, the challenges of getting from an outside the playoff team to a 500, and then even more getting a 50-win team. It's all the same things you go through when you're a small business owner as well. Ultimately, growing that business and getting it where it needs to be. You need the systems in place to optimize your talent, whether that be the actual talent on the floor, coaching, or analytics and systems that go into it. And that's exactly what you need with your business and what you get from Square. If you're starting a business, running one that deserves better tools, Square helps you sell, manage, and grow without slowing down. Right now, you can get up to $100 off Square hardware at square.com/go/NBA. That's square.com/go/NBA. Your business smarter with Square. Get started today. So we'll save the takeaway for the end here. The areas that I think we should at least keep an eye on, we already went through most improved. I think that's the most likely for the Bucks to have somebody win an award. But the other two that I came down to were Coach of the Year. Rick Carlisle got the most votes. And that's another one where So the list of top 5 they have is Rick Carlisle, Mitch Johnson, Will Hardy, Chris Finch, and Nick Nurse. Mitch Johnson took the Spurs to the finals last year. Will Hardy, I would probably put as the front runner right now, just because of the heightened expectations on Utah and all the talent that's there. And I think we've seen enough to know Will Hardy is a good coach. And a lot of the record that the Jazz had the last 2 years, especially, that was no doing of Will Hardy. It was kind of the handcuffs that were placed on him. So I think right now Will Hardy would be number 1. I mean, Nick Nurse. So you're coach of the year because you made a trade for Jaylen Brown and you signed LeBron James. Like, I understand this is a lot of times how that works, but that's where I'm at with that one. Minnesota, I just don't see being a top 4 team in the Western Conference. And if that's the case, I don't think you're going to win coach of the year for Chris Finch. And then Rick Carlisle, hasn't won the award in over 20 years. You can make a strong case. He has been the best coach in the league for years now, or at least one of the 3 best. But Indiana had the season from hell last year because of injuries and because Tyrese Halliburton didn't play. They were in the finals the year before that. So now all of a sudden they're healthy and they're winning again, and Rick Carlisle is the coach of the year. It seems like there's a lot of inconsistencies with this. So Will Hardy, I would say, is the front runner. If the Wizards had a different coach, I would say keep an eye on him. But I mean, I ultimately don't think he'll win the award, but I think there's a good chance Taylor Jenkins finishes in the top 5 if the Bucks play as we expect. And again, how they navigate the first 2 months basically of the season with that schedule is going to tell you a lot. But if the Bucks are last year's Suns, where they're the pesky team that's just continuing to hover around 500, and you're like, well, the Bucks beat this team, and they have a couple of nice wins, and we're seeing growth continued from Ryan Rollins and Kel'el Ware and other guys, I think Taylor Jenkins is going to be in the top 5.
Yeah, the Taylor Jenkins one is tough because it depends on just how many wins the Bucks are able to rack up along the way.
But the expectations are also much lower.
They are.
If you're Philly, you can't have 46 wins and Nick Nurse is coach of the year. So that's where Taylor Jenkins is kind of getting a head start.
Yeah, it's going to be in there. Coach of the year is a difficult one because it really does depend a lot on just how the season rolls out. When thinking of other teams that could be in that similar category to the Bucks, where it's you're not necessarily expected to be winning right now, but if you come out and you surprise some people, then you can make a name for yourself here. The Bucks are a good one in that sense with Taylor Jenkins, where it's it could be, but what if it's a Sean Sweeney in Orlando, because he was the guy that finally figured out how to get this team, from being 500, but just not performing up to expectations, and they end up being a top 4 seed in the East or something like that. This award is so hard to predict because we don't know how the season will unfold. But I get your point on Taylor Jenkins. I think that people who watched the Bucks last year and watch the team this year will see a noticeable improvement in coaching with this team and just what they're putting together and how they're running things. And they'll get some credit for that. But I think Taylor might be one of those guys who's a year away still, where it's not this season where he's getting talked about for coach of the year, but next season is when the Bucks can actually really start putting it together after, as we've heard, the beginning of the season, the roster is expected to look different than what it does when the season comes to a close. So I think for Taylor Jenkins, his case might be strongest next year when the team is starting to more closely resemble the core that the Bucks are looking to take forward into this next era.
See, I disagree, and I think if anything, your best chance is this year because, and again, he's going to have to win. The Bucks are going to have to win 39 games probably for Taylor Jenkins to be heavily considered for coach of the year. If they win 32 games, and because they won 32 last year, if they win 33 games and it's just I know they only won one more game, but man, they were competitive. They were in the top 15 in net rating. That type of team doesn't matter. But if they win close to 40 and you do this the year after Giannis was traded, that's the big thing, is there's no more Giannis and, oh, wow, the Bucks are actually better this year. That's the main advantage that he has. So I think his year to do it would be this year. The guys that stand out the most to me that would make the most sense for Coach of the Year, I already talked about Will Hardy, but I think maybe Quinn Snyder, depending on if Atlanta can hover around the top 4. You mentioned Sean Sweeney. I agree with that. If the Hornets are even better than they were a season ago, Charles Lee is going to be in there. I think that's really the ones that stand out the most. Toronto as well, like I suppose, assuming the Kawhi Leonard deal goes through, but like that's where I would kind of land as of right now. The other one is who will be the scoring champion this season, and for the life of me, I can't understand why we are not saying Miles Turner for it. But I would. The other one I would come down to so most improved coach of the year, and this one I feel least strongly about because also we have to see who's going to start where. But sixth man of the year, like if Kel'el Ware doesn't start, if Jaime Jaquez doesn't start, and you're getting that type of production, that's one where I could see, okay, let's see what happens here. Where I don't think the Bucks have anybody that's going to win the award, but similar to Jaime Jaquez last year, and I think the challenge for him is he was in that place last year, but could he finish somewhere similar? Right? Or if Kel'el Ware doesn't start, or if, there's some scenario where you're not starting Tyler Hero, Kevin Porter Jr. potentially. I could see the Bucks having somebody in the top 5 there by season's end.
Possibly. Again, it depends on too if the team can
your tone
overcome.
and possibly tells me I think there's no chance.
It's a hard one because the wins got to be there, and if they overpromise on what people expect from them, then like it could be. But the name that you actually said that was kind of like was if Kevin Porter Jr. does not start, given just what he can do offensively. And also, like, he's shown the signs of being able to be someone who can kind of be annoying, like getting the steals and whatnot. If Taylor Jenkins can unlock some more defensive side with him, if he, goes into the season and he's not looking away from shooting the 3-pointers as he started to do towards the end of last season, but you get the rest of that offensive package, buckets can get you sixth man of the year. So he feels like
ask
somebody who more
ask Jamal Crawford, ask Lou
exactly.
Williams,
Like he seems to be someone who could fit really cleanly into that mold of that type of player. So of the names that you mentioned, like Jaime for sure has to be in a consideration because he was, runner up this past season. If he doesn't start for sure, but like I kind of feel like he will start. We'll see. But I think Kevin Porter Jr. is actually like an interesting, sneaky sixth man of the year prospect for this team.
I think it seems like there's only room for Jaime or Kel'el Ware to start. So, because I'm assuming the Bucks are probably going to go with 3 guards. Or, I mean, like you could start Hero, Jaquez, Ware, and then Turner and Rollins. Like that would make some sense too, but we'll see. Like we haven't gotten any type of indication of how Taylor Jenkins wants to play and what this lineup and rotations are going to look like. That's the most intriguing thing as we move towards the regular season. Leave your thoughts on those awards. Are there any that we missed? How strongly do you disagree with the Bucks potential inclusion in any of these? And I think the more fascinating one is the most improved player discussion. So your thoughts on what Camille and I had to say about Ryan Rollins and Kel'el Ware, or if there's anyone else that we missed. Before we do wrap here, just really quickly, Camille, one of the other awards that was in there was Defensive Player of the Year. And Giannis finished second. So, like, MVP is what it is. Like, as you pointed out, he has perennially been in the top 5 until injuries happened, even as the talent around him started to dissipate. Mm-hmm. I like, it's nothing against Giannis personally. I just think we're past that run in the league, that window is kind of closed for those individual players. Where I really said, okay, come on, and raised an eyebrow was second in Defensive Player of the Year, because so you're telling me 1 year older, a season removed from injuries that wiped you out. And look, even if we're going to say the last month and a half of the season he could have played, fine. He's still missing a significant chunk of the season and habitual lower leg injuries. We've seen the defense slide for the last, 2-3 years, essentially. And now he goes to Miami, and it's all of a sudden, well, Giannis is clearly a strong candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. Even if you're going to tell me it's because you have Davion Mitchell in the backcourt and Wiggins as a help defender and Bam Adebayo. Where was this the last couple of years? Like all of a sudden, so now Giannis is like, well, this guy's a defensive weapon. But last year and the years before, it's like, I don't know. He's kind of on the downside. Like, I don't want to play into the league hates the Bucks and they want to get Giannis in a bigger market. But there's a lot of stuff that's starting to add up here this offseason, Camille.
I mean, a lot of things that people have been saying about what they expect, like the numbers they expect from Giannis, already let me know like you weren't watching what he was doing in Milwaukee, because that's a light night for Giannis. Like, he is that guy. He is that good. So we'll see. That's the one thing about Giannis in Miami. Well, one of the things I'm interested in watching, because I will watch a lot of Miami Heat games this year, but I am curious as to what he looks like on the defensive side of the ball. And if what we had seen in Milwaukee over the last few years, where there were times where it felt like there wasn't the same recovery, same rotation, same attention to detail at times, I am curious if that was more so like the situation of being in Milwaukee and feeling like we don't really have a shot at this. I got to save my energy for the other side of the ball. Or if we are starting to see some decline on that side of the ball from him going forward, which even with some decline, him being with Bam and Davion Mitchell, like that's a pretty good starting core, and Wiggins as well. So we'll see. That's one area of his game that I'm really, really curious to see how it continues to look while he's in Miami.
Leave your thoughts. I mean, you can leave them on Giannis, but the awards that we just ran through, I think we're going to have potentially a couple guests coming up this week. And we've talked about individual shows, players individually having their own shows, and what's a good season, what's a bad season, what is their role, and where do they need to improve most. We're going to start to get into those probably coming up after Labor Day, so then we can sprint into Media Day and the start of the season, but all those things on the horizon as well. That's going to do it for today's show. And coming up next, we send you off to the 24/7 national first ever NBA YouTube show here on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure you download that one and check it out as well. Locked On NBA for your second listen of the day. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.